The U.S. even recognized the justification for several Russian initiatives in that sphere over the past several years. And of course, one of the main points of the Foreign Ministry's document, though, it's something that Moscow has reiterated for months now: Russia has no plans to invade Ukraine.
There is no Russian invasion of Ukraine, which the United States and its allies have been declaring at the official level since autumn last year. And there are no such plans, so statements about the responsibility of Russia for the escalation cannot be regarded as anything other than an attempt to exert pressure and devalue Russia's proposals for security guarantees.
It's important to note, though, that Russia issued its proposals for security guarantees as a package deal. Moscow, of course, is ready to discuss the details of what it proposed, but when it comes to what measures need to be actually taken for regional security, it's all or nothing.
To de-escalate the situation around Ukraine, it is fundamentally important to take the following steps: to force Kiev to comply with a complex of measures, to stop the supply of weapons to Ukraine, to withdraw all Western advisors and instructors from there, to refrain from any joint NATO exercises with the armed forces of Ukraine, and to withdraw all foreign weapons previously delivered to Kiev from outside Ukraine's territory.
Now, the Russian Foreign Ministry also wants to bring attention to the anxiety being caused by the growing military activity of the U.S. and NATO near Russia's borders. The document says that Russia's red lines, its core interests when it comes to security, and the country's right to defend itself have all been ignored by Washington, and that now Moscow may be faced to take measures of a, quote, military character. It's definitely a scary possibility to consider, and with the U.S. promising to respond to Moscow's expulsion of its deputy ambassador to Russia, we're going to soon see if diplomacy really is able to fix this situation.
Okay, thanks for that, Don. That was artist Don Corden. As Don mentioned there, in the past few hours, Russia did expel the deputy US ambassador to Moscow amid the crisis over Ukraine. Washington has said, though, it will retaliate. And earlier, Russia's foreign minister mocked American media predictions of when Russia could invade Ukraine. Some journalists are now saying, though, it's going to happen later this week when the Olympics end, after yesterday's bet failed to materialise.
As to whether the escalation will end on February the 20th, I don't know, because we are not the ones who are escalating. We're not doing this. Politico, a well-known news outlet reporting about what is happening on the Russian-Ukrainian border, citing some supposedly reliable sources, said that what did not take place yesterday will begin on February the 20th, that there will be an invasion.
Talk about changing goalposts. February the 5th came and went, no invasion. So what did the Western political establishment and mainstream media do on Thursday the 17th? Apologise and say our intelligence wasn't worth the paper it was written on? No, of course not. Instead, they started backpedaling.
If something doesn't come to pass, it doesn't necessarily mean that what we've been warning of is wrong. I don't think you've heard us from any podium point to a specific day of an invasion. I think what you've heard from us from some time now is to make the point that what the Russian Federation has put in place are the capabilities it would need to order an attack at any time.
Ned Price has learnt his lesson, because this time he was more cautious and he said that I'm not going to put a specific date on it. Others, unfortunately, clearly weren't humiliated enough by all their false prophecies and did start placing new bets on when exactly it was going to be. The 20th of February was suddenly plucked. Now, one almost farcical explanation given for why there's this constant postponement of the ever-imminent Russian invasion was that President Putin was absolutely furious that every single time they have foiled his plans. So, on principle, he keeps changing it because he will not invade Ukraine according to the West's schedule. On Tuesday, the Russian Defense Minister came out and said, we are withdrawing a considerable chunk of those forces that were along the border near Ukraine, and that is because they've wrapped up the drills there, so they're going back to their garrisons, as was the plan all along. And in order to convince people that that is exactly what was going on, they even published footage of pretty heavy-duty weaponry loaded up on trains heading back to base. But apparently for the people who themselves failed to provide any evidence of this impending Russian invasion, this video footage, black and white, was not convincing.
What we haven't seen is evidence of withdrawal that has been claimed by the Kremlin. In fact, we've seen continued build-up of things like field hospitals.
What we're seeing is no meaningful pullback. President Putin's put in place the capacity to act on very short notice. He can pull the trigger, he can pull it today, he can pull it tomorrow, he can pull it next week. The forces are there if he wants to renew aggression against Ukraine.
So Russia keeps its troops at the border and it's seen as an aggressor. It starts withdrawing its troops from the border and it's still an aggressor. It really just can't win. But that is not all. Now even more outlandish claims are coming out from an unnamed senior official in DC, which allege that this withdrawal is in fact a huge bluff, and in fact the Kremlin is fortifying its forces to the tune of 7,000 troops and even some brand new field hospitals. The media seems quite keen to go along with this winter is coming rhetoric, but there are a few skeptical voices out there. For one, the Czech president has made quite an interesting observation that this wouldn't be the first time that US intelligence at best proved to be totally useless and at worst fabricated.
The Russians are not foolish enough to embark on an operation that will do them more harm than good. As for the US Secret Services, this is their third bluff. The first was with Iraq, the second was with Afghanistan, well, the third is now.
Well, certainly the Ukrainians are not benefiting from this instability. In recent days, the former US ambassador to Germany, that's Richard Grenell, he came out and he made quite an interesting insight. He said, and let's just bear in mind that he is an insider, so he is someone who is so well acquainted with the ins and outs of dirty politics and how, of course, the political elite thinks and works. Now, even he has accused Washington of being, quote, alarmist, and stated that the war hawk rhetoric coming from the White House at the moment isn't verifiable intelligence. So even in DC, no one is buying it. The intelligence clearly isn't there. And so yes, it is a completely legitimate question. Why the continued hype? Potentially the NATO chief might have given the game away.
Moscow has made it clear that it is prepared to contest the fundamental principles that have underpinned our security for decades, and to do so by using force. I regret to say that this is the new normal in Europe.
A new normal that involves, of course, new NATO combat units and bolstered defences close to Russia. It all turned out to be very convenient. If we're being cynical, the ever-imminent, fabled Russian invasion provided the perfect excuse for the greater militarization of Europe. And it also managed to silence all those people who only just a couple of months ago were asking, hasn't NATO outlived its purpose? It managed to resurrect the military alliance, give it a new breath of life. And of course now it exists to keep Russia at bay. It almost is like a second Cold War. So NATO's been given the green light to expand. Meanwhile, stateside, what we've got is President Biden, who's apparently looking to get over $770 billion for 2023's defense budget, which, by the way, something that no one talks about, is 8 times what Russia spends on defense. But still, it's apparently Russia that's the aggressor.
Saskia Taylor speaking to me a bit earlier there. Now, opposition lawmakers